follow the commandments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set within the glorious Quran for us to follow. So we have been with this intention, inshallah, to start by having a little refresher of where we're at, what the lesson is about. We normally have this lesson on a Saturday, and today it's on a Sunday. Nonetheless, we've been discussing stories from the Quran, and particularly from Surah Al-Kahf. It's a long discussion about the surahs that I mentioned, the stories, the lessons that we have withdrawn from the surah so far. I've gone through some major surahs, Ashab al-Kahf, and also thereafter the two gardeners, the two friends, and now we're on the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and Khidr. So last week, this discussion starts at verse number 60, for those of you who are following, so hopefully we'll get through one or two verses today, inshallah, and draw lessons from this beautiful surah that we are recommended to recite every Friday. And through its recitation, we also think about the lessons, the guidance that's there for us. So last week we mentioned the backdrop to this story, which is mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, how Musa ﷺ was asked by one of his followers who is the most knowledgeable, and he gave an answer, and then a revelation was given that he must embark upon a journey to meet a particular person who has a type of knowledge or some guidance from Allah that Musa ﷺ doesn't know about. So Musa ﷺ, he sets off on this journey, and we know the basics of the story, the outlook of the story, so that's where we're going to be continuing from, and hopefully drawing some lessons, inshallah. Last week we mentioned that how we should have a goal within our life. That's where it starts from, and that's what's mentioned. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ. So this is a discussion that's taking place between Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and a fata. The word that's used here is fata, and literally the translation is a young man. In the Arabic language you have many words to describe different stages within manhood. So this word fatah normally is used for a young person who is an assistant. So he does all of the chores. There's a senior person. It was culture as well that when there is a senior person, you have someone to assist him or her, whatever they need, carry their bags, straighten their shoes, fix their food for them. This is something that we feel is somewhat lost, because there is no virtue found in service. It's about who will serve me and how can someone help me, rather than the other way, that how can we help our parents, for example, depending on what age you're at. How can you be of assistance to your children, to your family, to your neighbors, and all of these avenues that are there for the one who is searching for an opportunity of service. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, when he makes this intention, his young assistant is also ready to serve him, give him company, and do whatever chores that he needs. So this is one of the explanations of a fatah. It's typically used, this is the eloquence of the Quran, the beauty of the Quran, that we find that his name is known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what his name was, but this is a way to give Musa alayhi salatu wasalam's name is mentioned because he's the prophet. He is the virtuous man between the two, and this young man, and that's what it's translated as. So sometimes these words that you use to encourage someone, to call someone, it's not always that you have to call them by the name, but also by good titles. So fatah refers to that, an attendant in service. There's also mention of his name, Yusha bin Nun, or Yusha son of Nun. This is something else that's mentioned in the books of tafsir and commentary as well. Regardless of his name, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam makes it clear. He makes his goal clear. That was the point that we made last week. That he says to him, I shall not give up. وقال موسى لا أبرح. I shall not give up حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين, until I reach the meeting point of the two seas, or I shall go on for years. Or أمضي حقبا, like a lot of time will pass by, but I will not stop to search for this particular man. So obviously Khidr, but he doesn't know the exact meeting point. He's got a rough idea, he's been guided, but like the sea, how big the world is, how big land is, and then sea goes on for till the eye can see many a times, the oceans of the world and where they meet up. Nonetheless, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam clarifies his goal, that I'm sticking by this task that I'm on to meet this person. And that's the point that we made of trying to have our goals set within our lives as well. Some major goals, obviously learning knowledge, learning Quran, whether it's Arabic, whether it's fiqh, whether it's hadith, learning about your own religion, various different topics that a lot of the time we think we know, but in essence we don't, till the opportunity comes, or when the time comes, and that's when we realize that, okay, I have to learn. So a quick example, someone comes to the country and they're told, they see many people with cars, so they think, okay, that seems pretty easy. They sit with a few people, they're like, okay, we have to travel by car. So now, where do I buy a car from, and let me start driving? Doesn't necessarily work like that. There's rules, regulations, there's the Greenway Code, there's the theory test, and then there's the practical test, and then you get a license, and you have to have insurance. These are all part of rules of this country that you go through, you learn, and then you're able to drive. So similar to that, we have a lot of aspects of life in each aspect. And this is why knowledge is so profound, because when you know the do's and don'ts, and you know what's recommended, and you know what is forbidden, then it's clear. So somebody going into business, for example, we don't just start off a business and think, okay, this makes sense to me, this is how the world is working. There's a part of that, but then there's a major part for us Muslims. By the way, non-Muslims or people who are not following faith and religion, they don't have these borders, they don't have these guidelines. So with faith and religion, it sets out certain guidelines for us within every aspect. So with business, there's certain things that I can do and some things which are not permissible for me to do. So I can't just sell a product that may be harmful to someone. It may be harmful to their body, and even though people want to buy it and it's their problem, but you're also in that line, so it then indirectly doesn't become permissible because you have that line of connection. Likewise, we have certain other things, or khamar, the alcohol, big money in this country for non-Muslims, and perhaps maybe other people of faith as well. Our faith and religion forbids these things. Lying to someone, cheating, deceiving, these are all points that are general, but at the same time, with any business venture that you take, it's always good to go through the guidelines. That's just one example. Someone else might not be looking for work. It may be a relationship. It may be parenthood. So there's a lot of different aspects of life that we need to learn about through our religion. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us? So that's something that we also pick up from this verse. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he clarifies his goal. he wants to meet this man. We'll move on to the next verse, inshallah. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا نَسِيَا حُوتَهُمَا فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا. We just go through the translation. So when they reached the meeting point of the two seas, they forgot their fish, and it made its way into the sea as a tunnel. So you just have to picture the scene a little bit first of all. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam with his attendant, they are traveling and they're looking for a sign, they're looking for something to happen, they're looking for this this fish, and that's what was told to them, that this fish which they had was put in a basket, and when that fish comes out, it would just jump into the sea. That would be the point where you meet this person. So because they're traveling, they make a pact that one person stays awake, the other person can get some rest, and we take turns like that. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his attendant, they were taking turns. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was resting, and at that time the attendant, he also, some of the narration says that either he nodded off or also he forgot. Why did he forget? Wallahu alam. Whether he didn't want to disturb, and then when Musa alayhi salatu wasalam woke up, or when he completed his rest, then he was going to tell, but then he forgot. So that's one thing that's mentioned here, that they forgot. Nasiya, both of them. That's interesting too. When both of them, they reached that point, they both forgot. Nasiya hutahuma. And then the فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ, it's a bit technical within the Arabic language, that they made their way back. Now, sabilahu, what does it refer to? Whether it's the fish or whether it was the servant, he turned back the boat and said, okay, there's a track here that we can see. Now we're going to go back on our tracks and we find where that fish came out. And they went back. Or the fact that the fish left a trail. Where is this ocean? We mentioned this last week as well, that there's a few different narrations that make mention of Majma' al-Bahrain, where the two seas join together. We also mentioned this, that there are many places in the world where two streams or two seas, they join together, and water is connected like that. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and Khidr, that was the meeting point. So now they go back on their tracks, and we move on to the next verse. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَا قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. This is a verse that's connected to the previous two verses, that while they're making their way back, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he asks that when they went further, he said to his young man, Musa alayhi salatu wasalam sends to this his attendant, he asks him, and he says, bring us our morning meal. So that the fish was also their meal, or whether it was something separate. We have indeed had much fatigue from this journey. So now what we learn from the Quran, once again, it's a key point. When we spoke about learning knowledge, you embark upon a journey. Sometimes we also have to travel, but in your mind, we travel. And within our mind, with our heart, we are traveling through knowledge. We are learning. And that journey, metaphorically speaking, sometimes traditionally people used to travel. They used to travel towards knowledge. It wasn't the communication that we have right now. You want to learn knowledge. Yes, we have books. Traditionally, within the world, that's the way that we've been learning. There's books that are written, you go through them, there's explanation, then there's books that are written about those books, about certain sacred texts. and that was how it was. But that was available to everybody. The main source of knowledge has always been through action. It's always been through action. So you could have a book, but it's not going to have that effect that you have by being in the company of someone who has knowledge. And what we mean by that is the people who have knowledge, they are living by that. So it's not just, okay, this is written in the books and this is how we should be behaving, but rather they're displaying and living that example. And that's why traditionally from heart to heart would knowledge be passed on. And only when a sheikh, the student stayed with him for long enough, would the sheikh give permission for that student now to also go ahead and teach, to pass that on. And this is also why we, within our tradition, we have the isnad system, ijazat, where one person, what they've learned from their teacher, who was their teacher, and going back to the Prophet ﷺ with a lot of ulum, various different sciences, whether it's tajweed or hadith, it leads back to the Prophet ﷺ. Why is that important? Because we have access to apparent knowledge, or we can call it information, whatever you like, whatever's in your mind, we can type it up and get various different views, and it actually becomes more confusing because there are so many different views. So if somebody's asked a question, but someone within another country gives an answer, doesn't know the dynamics, doesn't know the challenges, doesn't know the atmosphere, doesn't know the law perhaps in another country, doesn't know the behavior of people. And this is all the work of the ulama. Like they have to analyze all of these things and locally then give a ruling regarding whatever it may be. Coming back to the journey that we take a journey to seek knowledge. And that journey, if we are sincere, it will be testing. It will be tiresome. There will be times where things don't make sense. But we have to be determined. Because the greater goal, and we also know the virtue of seeking knowledge. This is something that's been lost. I need to seek knowledge. I need to learn basic Islamic knowledge. So staying with people of knowledge, that's the best form of learning, but also having that determination. And a lot of the time it's a rough road. It's a rough road that we have to go on. It's going to be challenges. You want to learn Quran. So many times we've had classes here in the masjid, many brothers and sisters, and they have that zeal to begin with. I want to learn Quran, I want to recite, I want to contemplate, I want it to be part of my life. But then after a little while it becomes challenging, because there's work that you have to put in to change your life. You have to give time to practice. You have to give time to go over the notes. Sometimes there may be questions, whatever the nature of the class, but you will have to go through some difficulty to gain sacred knowledge. And many of our teachers used to tell us when we were studying within madrasa, masajid, madaris, they would tell us that the Quran, what are you seeking? This is important here. What are you seeking? When you're seeking knowledge, this is a nur from Allah. Religious knowledge is a special guidance from Allah. And Allah only gives that to people who He selects. Something that Allah chooses. We have to give our full effort. Allah selects. So our teachers used to tell us that you want to learn Quran, you know the value of Quran? Subhanallah. Now if you to say, within the world, yeah, you want to have a business? Okay, maybe go for, what makes most money in the world right now? What makes most money? Gold? Gold makes most money? Diamonds? Yeah. Pearls? These precious stones? Right? Sometimes you have a diamond, which is a stone, and it goes into, maybe 100,000, maybe more. Regarding that stone, the value of that here, because it's so valuable, people within countries where it's found, they're ready to kill one another for that stone, that precious diamond. It's a known fact, right? Because it's so precious, even more than someone's life, obviously not, but that's the extent that people would go through. They would do anything. They would lose their own soul in pursuing that goal. But the point is that for something valuable, dependent on how valuable it is, you have to put that much effort in. If it's something cheap, nobody really cares, you get it everywhere. If it's something precious, rare, lots of people will want it, and they would go to high extents to also gain that possession. Now, these are things of the dunya. My dear brothers and sisters, we cannot put a price on knowledge of the Quran, or knowledge of Allah. Anything that leads us to Allah, cannot put a price on it. It's beyond measure. And people who truly have value for that, they know that this Quran, or anything connected with Quran, it's a source of blessings for me and my soul in not just this life, but it continues to the next life. And everything else, it finishes in this life. When we finish, our wealth, no matter how much we have, ends. But your a'mal and the knowledge continues. So that's why it becomes priceless. And it's guidance from Allah. The best guidance that we can ever receive from any being is Quran. So when we're seeking that, because it's so precious, mentally also we have to be ready. This is a great treasure. I really need this in my life. I really need to be part of people of Quran. So then we make steps towards being prepared for that. And once we can do that, then the assistance of Allah comes. So coming back to what I want to say about the teachers used to tell us that with Quran, if you give everything that you have, you give all of yourself, not, okay, I'm going to spend a few hours, and even that's good, it's a lot, compared to how much people really are spending. But our teachers used to say that if you want it to be part of your life, you have to give everything of yours, and then you might get a little tiny part of the Quran. And even that tiny part is enough for generations. Because the Quran is, like we said, it's such a treasure. Priceless. So giving yourself and being motivated, only then are we knocking the doors of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, what verse were we on? Okay, we move on to the next verse number 63. قال أرأيت إذ أوينا إلى الصخرة فإني نسيت الحوت وما أنسانيه إلا الشيطان أن نذكره واتخذ سبيله في البحر عجبا. So you guys following the scene. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is determined. They're on the sea, looking for this meeting point. His assistant, he's young, and young people make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're all human beings. We forget, we make mistakes, and that's part of life. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, when he asks for the food, that's when he remembers the assistant. So now we come to what he said. He said, you see, when we stayed at the rock, I forgot the fish. It was none but Shaitan who made me forget to tell you about it. And amazingly, it made its way into the sea. So the ulama, they have a bit of discussion here. They say, okay, what actually happened? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he asks for some food, and at that time the assistant, he remembers and he says, you know that we were, back then we had a little rest and there was a rock. Yeah, you remember there was this big rock, and then we started traveling again, and that's when the fishy came out, and I forgot to tell you. So he mentions, I forgot. He also says, within his language, he reminds that where does that forgetfulness come from? It was from none other than Shaitan. So, what actually happened, we will never know. The ulama, they have their explanations about what possibly happened here, that they went away, and then there was that point that they remember where they rested and they came back to that, or whether it was something that got the fish came out, or whether it was just something, that a point that they remember within their journey. Yeah, significant point. There's many times that you're traveling and you remember landmarks. It may be you have these different signs whenever we travel, of museums, of tourism, major event places and stuff like that. So similar to this, we have Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he's asking, and then he gets told that, all right, now we have to travel back. But the way that he mentions, also he clarifies that these are things from Shaitan. We will stop here for this week, inshallah. We're going to be continuing, and the story is getting interesting right now, because now they're going to go back, and when they go back, they will meet with Khidr, and that will be the next verses, and also, because it's a story, it's the next scene within the story. So this is just a little build-up towards what's about to happen, and the meeting that's going to take place, this madrasa that's going to happen. There's going to be things that Musa is going to learn, and his reactions, and for us also. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago, do not think that he's a prophet, this was something that's strange that happened. But a lot of the lessons that are found in this one story, they are relevant to a lot of things that happen to us every day. The things that are happening to us in life, how we view them, there is so much psychological lessons that are found in this Quran for us to seek guidance. So how we see things, that's one of the main ones. How we see things, how they appear to us, may not be the truth. So we see something and we think, okay, that doesn't seem good. It's only later on in time that we find out, all right, there was something more to it. At that time I thought it wasn't good, and afterwards it became good. And that happens a lot to us in life. What is actually good or bad for us, we don't know. How we can measure it, is a good way to measure things, is that if something draws you closer to Allah, even through calamity, even a big problem happens, but you turn to Allah, it's not really a problem, that becomes a blessing for us. Someone gets hurt. They pray to Allah like we've never prayed before, with such devotion. Only Allah, you can only help me now. So that apparent problem becomes a blessing for us to dig deep within our souls and make that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask in a way that perhaps we never have before, with such devotion and sincerity. So that's a good way to measure. If it's drawing us closer to Allah, then a blessing. If something we see is a blessing, oh yes, I'm blessed with this, that, the other, but then you forget to remember Allah is distracting you. It feels nice. It's not really a blessing. It's drawing you further from Allah. It's distracting you. So that's a good way to measure what is good and bad, but we'll go through some of the incidents and how they are related to us in our lives, inshaAllah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance from the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of the Quran. May we spend more time with the Quran and feel sweetness of the Quran. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless our hearts with Quran and Sunnah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove all evil and shar from our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always protect us against the whispers of the shaitan. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma shalla la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.